Sound the adjutant's call. As any military adjutant knows, the pass in review is a long-standing military tradition that reflects the peaceful transfer of power to a new commander to inspect his troops upon assumption of command. My name is Major Mike Webb, U.S. Army Reserve retired, and in my first assignment on active duty with the Elite 75th Ranger Regiment, I had the honor to have served under the adjutant of that unit, and a few years later I would serve in my first assignment as an officer in the U.S. Army Reserve as the adjutant for the 1st of the 417th Regiment Basic Combat Training, where later on in my assignment there, the current commander of the USAR would become my commander. Over a drill sergeant unit supporting basic training and installations under the responsibility of training and doctrine command. And so, as the class of 2023 prepares their traditional march for commencement exercises and graduation for the next few minutes, we shall conduct a brief after-action review of lessons learned for 2 years while, consequent to a pandemic, the doors of schools to in-person instruction had been closed by educators, mindful that, at least according to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, in a landmark decision of the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education, education is perhaps the most important function of state and local government. One of the first lessons instilled in students during the pandemic was the phrase, masks save lives. Masks save lives. True or false? Well, in September 2022, Jacob Wallace, Paul Goldsmith, Pinkham, and Jason L. Schwartz, professors at Yale and also Harvard University, had published a working paper for the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, a reputable private nonpartisan research organization founded in 1920 with funding from the Carnegie Foundation after examining excess fatalities throughout the pandemic crisis. Masks save lives. They had concluded that in the COVID pre-vaccine period, the association between excess death rates and county-level vaccination rates are nearly identical for Democrats and Republicans. And so, at least according to NBER, looking at the excess fatalities in that mask save lives equation during the beginning of the pandemic, when the primary measures that had been available and utilized to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 had been lockdowns, like closing schools and masking mandates, masks did not empirically save any lives. A very different lesson than that which had been learned by those graduating in the class of 2023 and learned in their schools. At least according to the Supreme Court at the end of the 19th century in the matter Cordova v. Hood, means of knowledge and the duty of using them are in equity, the equivalent to knowledge itself. And so the relevant inquiry becomes a question of what the educators who had implemented these measures knew or should have known about the masking mandates, and especially the implementation of what experts describe as cordon sanitaire protocols or lockdowns. One popular case decided during the first year of the pandemic declaration was DHS v. Board of Regents for the University of California, a case celebrated when the former governor, went to Fairfax to talk about the COVID-19 update for that week, popularly called the DACA case, and he received 2 rounds of applause, indicating that everyone understood that the holding or legal conclusion that at least an attorney would take away from this presidential authority is that it is a foundational principle of administrative law. The judicial review of agency action is limited to the grounds that the agency invoked when it took the action, what was known at the time. And when the schools in Arlington had acted even before the Virginia governor in canceling in-person instruction on March 14, 2020, with less than 45 cases in the entire state of over 8 million people, and without even one fatality. First fatality would not be reported until March 15th. It was already known that after only 1 month of lockdowns, limited to Wuhan and surrounding areas, not the entire 1 billion population nation, on February 24, 2020, the WHO, that had declared the pandemic declaration, had reported China is already and rightfully working to bolster its economy, reopen its schools, and return to a more normal semblance of society, even as it works to contain the remaining chains of COVID-19 transmission. And they would actually declare victory over COVID-19 by September 2020. China, after only a month, was reopening schools. 1 month before schools in Arlington decided to close for 2 entire years. And Arlington is one of the most educated municipalities in the entire nation, ranked 14th for holders of graduate degrees and the home of the most government scientists. So undoubtedly, they knew the tale of the administration of the tonics to which they had put their signature, and would have failed in due diligence if they had failed to read that definitive report by the organization that had declared the pandemic. At least according to that report, the Arlington superintendent, who holds a doctorate degree from Columbia University, apparently had failed to read before closing down the Arlington public schools, even before the governor's lockdowns, was they had found, after examining 19 times more cases than had yet been reported in the entire United States, that they could not even find one instance where a child had infected an adult. Yet the superintendent, Francisco Duran, had closed schools for 26,911 kids. They had concluded that COVID-19 transmission in children appears to be limited compared with influenza, and to date worldwide, according to UNICEF, despite almost 7 million total fatalities worldwide, less than 18,000 have been persons under the age of 20. And that report, after finding a disease presenting in a discrete, clustered outbreaks with no wider community spread, yet infecting primarily farming families, the political opposition in the Detroit of China and the largest city in the central mainland, had concluded that it is not clear whether this even correlates with the presence of an infectious virus being transmitted from person to person, finding a secondary attack rate of less than 5%, 12 times too low to be described as a highly contagious disease that only then would be clinically capable of setting off a super spreader event. Certainly something that a vaccinologist, a virologist, or a biologist should know. And how many kids graduating in the class of 2023 did not receive that basic science lesson while schools were closed? This briefing is unclassified. Honest. Carry on. This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.